Good morning, everyone, and welcome to all of the new teachers out there. I hope that this lecture is extremely helpful for you today. The decision-making framework that will be discussed today is a process of selecting a strategy to support either your client or your student. And this process encompasses a number of elements in order to produce positive outcomes. Throughout this lecture, I'll be explaining the decision-making framework to you, but I'm also going to share my experience of applying this framework with one of my students, Michael, which will hopefully paint a clear picture of how you can use this as a teacher. The framework itself is mapped out to lead to the most positive outcomes for an individual. The process begins by understanding a specific trio of elements prior to even choosing a strategy. This trio is the client or the student themselves and their specific context, values, and needs, developing a practical question or a priority for this person that's both relevant and attainable, and then examining the best available evidence that's closely aligned with the identified goal and the client's values and context. This includes the consideration of the client's characteristics, their values, the resources that are available, and the current skills and time. And this all requires the use of your professional judgment in order to consider all these aspects and to find the best fit for your client or student. Firstly, we will discuss understanding the client context. This involves a whole number of considerations, such as understanding the individual's characteristics, the resources that are available to the individual, such as time, money, their setting, and also the skills and training that might be applicable to the context of that person. So I want you to meet Michael. Michael was a student of mine who I applied this framework to. So firstly, I needed to consider the context of Michael. I knew how old he was. I knew he had an autism spectrum diagnosis. He had a huge interest in technology, Xbox, PlayStation, iPads, everything. He had a very loving and involved family who were very supportive of any kind of strategy or something that we wanted to implement into our classroom. He already received some social coaching as part of his services. He had 2 teachers in his general education classroom. He was academically aligned to his peers, if not above. We did begin to notice that he had a lagging skill in perspective taking. This was most evident in his reading comprehension as his books and characters began to grow in complexity, and he was also beginning to have some unusual confrontations with his peers, such as he was having a difficult time understanding if something was supposed to be funny or not. If someone would accidentally bump him, he would get easily irritated. So we wanted to figure something out for him. He did, however, crave a lot of social feedback. He enjoyed learning about social nuances, and he would often seek help from his teachers. So I feel like I'm understanding the context of my client right now. Next, we need to consider the whole context of the client and devise a practical question that addresses an attainable goal. When it came to Michael, I had to truly consider what should be the biggest priority for him. This involved discussing my concerns with his parents, my co-teacher, and all other supporting staff that worked with him. And at the very heart of our conversation, we managed to find an attainable goal for Michael. We thought, how can we improve Michael's perspective taking to support both his social interactions and his academic development? We chose this specific goal because we felt it was a core skill that would help Michael in many ways, for example, his reading comprehension and his social interactions. So far, we've understood the context of the client, and we've developed a practical question. Next, we need to evaluate the best available evidence. When finding the best available evidence to select a strategy, there are a few things you must keep in mind. The research should somewhat match the client and their context. For example, if the research is based on adults with autism, it's probably not going to be the best fit if your client is a toddler. The research should be addressing the outcomes you desire. And you need to think, is this strategy going to be the best fit for my client? And also, what barriers are evident with this strategy? Are you going to be able to overcome them? When I began the process of researching strategies, the first thing I did was go to the National Professional Development on Autism website, and I looked at their list of evidence-based practices. This made it easier for me to narrow down on my search to strategies I felt could be applicable to Michael. After reading up on many of the practices, I picked 3 practices I felt could be beneficial to Michael. I chose social skills training, video modeling, and scripting. Next, I had to evaluate each one, which was kind of like a pros and cons list based on research. First, I researched scripting. Scripting was shown to be an effective strategy, and it could support Michael's social interactions, including those confrontations that I mentioned earlier. However, it also seemed a little bit below his current abilities and required some additional resources. It didn't seem like the best fit. Next, I researched video modeling. There were many pros to this strategy. It's been heavily studied and had proven results in improving perspective taking and also generalizing this skill across situations. It was incredibly relevant to our goal, and it was also relevant to Michael's interests. As I said, he loves anything to do with technology. And last, I researched social skills training. I also liked this strategy. It had a lot of research to back up its success and seemed very modifiable. However, I knew that with Michael's context, he was already receiving a modified version of social skills training at school. It would require training of his teachers and his parents, and it also had shown risks of the skills learnt during social skills training to not being generalized. When combining all the information I had, the client, context, the goal, and the best available evidence, I used my professional judgment and decided on video modeling. The research matched the client context and goal, it was relevant to Michael's interests, and it was relatively easy to implement. And that was the whole process that I went through in order to just select a strategy. However, once you decide on the strategy, it's important to note that the work is not over. You need to consider any adaptations you want to make while still staying true to the research and the goal. Before I describe the adaptations I made to this strategy to suit the context of the client, I'll give a brief background on what video modeling actually is. So video modeling is a strategy. It involves demonstrations of behavior through a video with the intention that the subject, aka Michael, would imitate these behaviors. This strategy can be used with a variety of examples, such as peers, siblings, adults, or oneself, which is called video self-modeling. This is really great for Michael as the research has described the nature of this strategy from the perspective of the participants as watching TV, so I think Michael would like it. So the research I had done on video modeling showed me that this was a very flexible strategy, and as mentioned previously, could be used with pre-made videos with exemplary behaviors, or you can use peers, and you can also use the subject themselves. I wanted the videos to be of Michael and his surrounding peers, as I felt he would most enjoy and engage in this. So that's one adaptation I plan to make, so that this strategy would suit my student. I also wanted to expand this strategy into his social coaching sessions and at home. I plan to attend multiple social coaching sessions and to film his learning for him to watch later, and also film the social learning he did in the classroom and send this home with his family to watch together and to discuss. This was another adaptation I decided to make. I wanted the strategy to be spread across the board and involve as many people as possible. Lastly, I also planned for the video modeling to occur in real time, rather than scheduled sessions throughout the week. If there was a teachable moment, we would pause our lesson or our day and video a desirable behavior. For example, if one of Michael's peers was accidentally bumped when sitting on the rug, and the person bumped them and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bump you," we would stop, have them quickly reenact this interaction whilst we filmed it, and then move on and have Michael watch it later. Next, you need to consider how exactly you are going to implement this strategy. How are you actually going to do this with all of these adaptations? Who is going to implement this strategy? Is it just you? Or are there more people involved? What resources do you need, such as visual cue cards, a recording device, etc.? Do any of the people involved require training? In terms of Michael, this required a lot of considerations and planning. For example, I needed to map out everyone that I needed to contact to make this as beneficial as possible. I needed to speak with his social coach to plan the sessions I could attend. I needed to reach out to his family some more and explain the strategy and what I needed them to do when we sent the videos home for them to watch. I had to devise a plan with my co-teacher on who was going to tackle the teachable moments and do the actual videoing, and who's going to keep track of the rest of our class. I also had to consider, out of Michael's peers, who would be the most valuable to help model these desired behaviors, and also who's going to make Michael feel the most comfortable. There is a lot to consider when you're mapping out the actual implementation of a strategy. And also, you need to be very critical of yourself and evaluate the outcome. Be honest. I had to think, in the end, how much progress did Michael make? Was this actually the best strategy for him? What kinds of changes could I make to make this even more beneficial? Do any of the people involved have critical feedback they would like to share, and how could I involve them? There are so many ways a strategy could be adapted and implemented to lead to a positive outcome. The decision-making framework encompasses all those that know, understand, and work with the client or student involved. The framework brings people together to hone in on a specific goal and focus on it, rather than trying to tackle too many things at once. In terms of your careers as teachers, it's a complete evidence-bound strategy, and it forces you to truly act as professionals and grow as a teacher as you let the research and the professional judgment guide you. Thank you for listening to the description of this framework and how it can be applied in real time. For more information on video modeling and the research behind it, please read my rationale. Thank you.